Yes, go ahead.
Do you want to respond?
Did you want to respond to the question, Ambassador Roy?
No, I think Minxin
Okay.
handled that adequately.
Okay. Go ahead. Stand up, please.
Oh.
Yeah, ask your question. Go ahead. Thank you.
Al Isley, the Hill newspaper. I didn't intend to ask a question about the Olympics, but I just happened to pick up the Chicago Tribune around here, and it says that the estimated cost of the 2016 Olympics for Chicago will be $5 billion. $3 billion for operations and $2 billion for construction.
That's way on this
I'm sorry?
below Beijing's cost. This is understatement because Beijing is going to cost $30 billion.
It's $2 billion.
30.
Oh, okay. I just want that. But you cite the weakness of the Chinese financial system in your paper. My question is, do the recent problems in the Chinese stock market make it more difficult for you to achieve the kind of agreement, bipartisan agreement, or bilateral engagement that you're seeking? Is that an obstacle? Is it?
I don't think so. Chinese stock market is a work in progress. And Chinese do not have enough historical experience with the stock market to fully understand how stocks go up and go down. Many people were concerned about the sharp rise in the Chinese stock market and expected a correction to take place. But even when you expect a correction, you don't necessarily expect a 10% loss precipitously. And that's what causes people to sit up and take notice. At the moment, the markets, well, they were clearly spooked for a short time, but now everybody's trying to pour oil on worries and pretend that there are no underlying structural problems. I think, in fact, that one should be cautious in investing in Chinese stocks because transparency is still not good enough to really assess the health of companies, and because too many investors in the Chinese stock market do so as a lottery rather than because of sophisticated understanding of the underlying strength of the companies. But essentially, China's capital markets are weak and underdeveloped, meaning that financing for China's development does not come from new stock issues, but from other forms of finance. And so therefore, the health of the Chinese stock market, in my opinion, is not structurally linked to the health of the Chinese economy the way it is in countries which depend on stock markets to generate the capital for investment.
I take it you're saying that it depends on foreign investment as well.
Well, the market that was effective was trade in Chinese stocks, not the stocks that are denominated in terms of foreign exchange. So essentially, foreign investors cannot invest in the stocks that were affected in the Shanghai stock market.
Yes, go ahead.
I'm Li Xiaoling from Sony Group. I almost agree everything with the two speakers, and I really appreciate. I have comments I really like the royalty accounts. From my point of view, I've been observing U.S.-China relationship from the business circle as well as from the academic circle. I think Chinese leadership has been advised by three communities: the diplomats, the trade people, and the new bankers. Bankers who speak, English, who have some kind of exposure to the international practice. So I think the traders and the professionals in the trade and in the banking services are new friends of America. But the diplomacy has a continuity, like 80, maybe 90 years continuous from the Yan'an period of time. So, Dr. Pei, you made a comment. The top leaders have only like 5% attention to the U.S.-China relationship. Priority is domestic issues. But they have been heavily depending on the dominant voice from Chinese diplomacy, plus some observation from the bankers and from the traders. I'd like to, from the American side, I think there's a discontinuity. There's academic, the only constant voice is academics. Scholars, China hands, or sometimes I would say China players. American businessmen engaged in business or other activities in China for 2 decades.
Charlotte, could you couch your question?
So
Do you have
my
a
question number one, do you observe this kind of discrepancy between there's a continuity for the Chinese diplomats, there's discontinuity for the, not saying the professional, all the U.S. diplomat professional outstanding, very good diplomats, but there's kind of a policy discontinuity. Is that my question clear? I see the Chinese leaders has been good advice compared with the U.S.
Let me try and answer to that. The issue is on continuity and discontinuity in terms of Chinese policies. I think to a significant degree there has been fundamental shift in the advice that goes to China's leaders because of the fundamental change in China's relationship to the world. During the Yan'an period and during much of the early history of the People's Republic of China, China was isolated from the West, particularly from the United States. China now, in both trade and financial and diplomatic terms, is embedded in a globalized world. The nature of China's diplomacy has moved from a third world focused China diplomacy to a continued rhetorical attention to the third world, but China's diplomacy is really focused on the sources of education and technology that are so important for China's future economic growth. That means they're really focused on the developed world, and that's a fundamental change in the nature of China's diplomacy. The second thing is China previously, particularly during the Cultural Revolution period, or the pre-Cultural Revolution period, had an ideologically driven foreign policy. And now China has a very practically driven foreign policy aimed at creating what Minxin referred to as this zone of peace around China so that they can focus on economic development. The difference in the nature of China's financial managers now as opposed to the 1970s is dramatic. China's current financial managers are completely comfortable at meetings of the global financial leaders. And while China's banking system remains weak, and China has not yet been able to develop a method of allocating loans based on assessment of risk. There's still political allocation of loans, or loans go to people based on political connections more than assessing whether this is a good investment as opposed to that investment, which is why the problem of non-performing loans remains a serious issue in China. But essentially, China has a much more modern relationship in both the banking and the financial sectors because of their globalized economy. So I think there is discontinuity rather than continuity in all three strands that you referred to in your comment.
Yeah. There's also discontinuity in terms of the qualifications of China's diplomatic corps, because the quality of China's diplomats today is far superior to their predecessors, just by several orders of magnitude. It's incomparable. And because these people are all trained, most of them are trained in the West, have multiple tours, know the West really well, very savvy, and know how to interact. And also within China, the scholarly community serving the government on foreign policy issues has also improved its capabilities a great deal. They come to international conferences very often. Most of them have degrees or have spent time studying in the West. So I think the advice the Chinese leadership now gets on foreign policy is probably much, much better than that. And it's also a more, I would say it's a more open process today than it was 30 years ago.
Yes.
Next question.